Welcome everyone to the April 13th version of our monthly meeting at the Building Operators Association of Canada. This month we're pretty excited because we have Nmax with us, and I'll introduce them in a minute. There's probably going to be some good activity on this one, so I'm looking forward to it. Some of our upcoming webinars that we have lined up. Next month, we're going to be having Gentech talk about emergency generators, and that's on May the 11th. And then tentatively on June the 8th, we're going to have Luke Chamberlain with Spartan Peripheral Controls talk about control valves. He's a valve guru, so that may be another fun one. But anyway, just to sort of catch up what's been going on, hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a look at our magazine, and which we emailed out to everyone, and also it's of course available on our website, www.boacalgary.com, and you can download the magazine from there as well. And it's got all of the past issues of the magazine, as well as actually some good articles in the magazine this month, and as it always is, but it's looking pretty good. And so hopefully everybody has had the opportunity to have a look at the magazine and the website. And as far as announcements, maybe I'll get Les to help me out with this one. It's we have sort of a collaboration with the chief engineer, so I'll let Les sort of talk about their upcoming topic. We're not sure when it is, but it'll be coming up the end of this month or first part of May. Want to introduce that to everybody, Les?
I will, Mark. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. The Chief Power Engineers of Alberta have put together a collaboration on competency-based training, and we've always been a supporter of that once you get your ticket, it shouldn't always be just satisfied to be there forever. Those things that are most important tasks that we do should be recertified and relooked at. Those things can be directed as critical tasks. The guest speaker will be Dr. Mark Kolodji. He is the head of World ICU. He looks after competency-based training for doctors, nurses, anything that has critical nature to it, because some of the more complicated tasks we perform need to be verified. We just can't come in and on cold and try to do something that has a lot of steps on it. It's going to be put on, we look to probably the first week of May to be done, and I will mail out the invitation through MailChimp to all of the recipients, which we have about 2,400 recipients of that, and 24,000 on our tasks with LinkedIn. So just stay tuned for that. As soon as we firm up the date, I look to see about the end of the first week of May. Look for the email for that to go out, and it'll still be like this, about a 40-minute talk with 15 minutes of questions and answers. So thanks, Mark, for the introduction and getting that information out.
Okay, so I want to thank Brandy Eagleson with Nmax for helping set this up, this little chat that we're going to have. The topic is ENMAX Power, preparing the grid for the future. And I might as well just read you the little blurb in case everybody missed it, that Brandy put together. So ENMAX Power is a regulated electrical utility that owns, operates, and maintains the transmission and distribution system in and around Calgary. As new technologies are advanced, such as electric vehicles, and distributed energy resources like solar generation, ENMAX Power is taking proactive steps to understand the grid of the future. And we're going to have 3 speakers. So they've definitely brought some horsepower to this one. Our first speaker is going to be John. I'm not going to even try your last name, but I'll just refer to you as John. And you're the manager of grid innovation with Nmax, and you'll be joined by Javal, which is one of your senior engineers in your grid innovation team, and Nicole Mortar is I got Nicole's last name, okay, is also a senior engineer with grid innovation, and she's going to be talking a little bit more about electric car charging, so that'd be interesting. So anyway, John, you might as well just take it away. I think what we'll do is I'll be sort of monitoring the questions and answers, or the questions as they come in, and then I'll just ask the questions verbally, and we'll try to do that at the end, or wherever you however you guys want to do that. I guess if there's something burning, I can always prompt you, but we'll see how it goes. So without further ado, here's John with the first part of our talk.
Thanks, Mark. We're gonna keep this pretty casual. If the questions come in, feel free to kind of barge in, and this will be pretty casual. So, as Mark's already said, my name is John Nowostawski. I'm with the Grid Innovation team. That's part of ENMAX Power in Calgary, and Nicole and Javal are here with me as well. So, first of all, I mean, thank you for inviting us to speak. This is something that we like to get out and do. And I say get out in a digital format these days, but it's trying to get out and see our customers and how you use our energy and operate your businesses. So we do have a bit of a presentation here for you, and I'll introduce Nmax a little bit more in our team's role. We've got a bit of an overview here that you see. And then after that, we're going to hand it over to Nicole, who's going to talk a little bit more about electric vehicles and electric charging in the Calgary area. So I think you'll find it all pretty interesting. And then we're going to transition over to Javal, who's going to talk a little bit more about distributed energy resources and some of the other applications that are actually very pertinent for building operators. So again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I think that's probably the best way to do it, and we'll try and address it as we go. So on this slide here, I just want to give you really a brief overview to Nmax and the group of companies, because it's confusing, I think, for a lot of people. And Nmax Corporation overall is actually split into 3 different entities that you see here. There's Nmax Power in Calgary. There's actually a new one, which is Versant Power in the state of Maine. And then there's Nmax Energy, our retail business. So Javal, Nicole, and myself, we represent the Nmax Power side of the business, which is the regulated side. And as you've already described through Brandy, I mean, we provide the facilities and the services to really deliver the electricity to Calgary and area. So this part of the business also does other things like metering services. There's interconnection requests or for generation, outage notifications if you subscribe to the Nmax Power app that we have, and any other design and engineering services as well. So I think we can go to the next slide here. Before I actually pass over to Nicole, I just want to highlight just a few pieces of information that I think this group will find interesting. This is it's a year old. I was really hoping to get our 2020 stats in here, but coming down to the wire, they weren't able to get us for us, which is okay. But I think it still tells us a great story. So in 2019, we had upper and top quartile reliability for our Calgary-based customers, and this is amongst the peers as monitored by the CEA. So, this really helps to make sure that makes Calgary an exciting business place to be and to maintain and operate your facilities. So, and then really make sure that there's hopefully less of an impact when there is outages, because there's a less frequency, and hopefully the duration is also lower than other areas within Canada. And that hopefully should translate into less financial impacts and inconveniences for the buildings that you operate. The other one that I was going to talk about is Javal will speak a little bit more about a recent project that really makes customers' lives and potentially developers' lives easier. And it's an example of how we look to improve customer satisfaction. And so I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him take that away. It's a very cool one, very visually appealing. You'll see that. And finally, we continue to invest in the electric system to ensure the safe and efficient delivery of the power. So we're always investing. It's not just sitting as the 100-plus-year-old system that we come to rely on. So what I'll finish off with is really just a really brief description of our grid innovation team. It's really a place where we test ideas for our business and that customers may be facing opportunities and challenges. We explore this technology. We're sharing ideas within Nmax itself and at events like this one. And we're really trying to drive as much value as possible for everyone to make use of electricity. And two areas that we're very interested in, and luckily, how conveniently we have Nicole and Javal here to talk about them, is transportation electrification or electric vehicles and distributed energy resources. So with that, I'll pass that over to Nicole, and she'll talk a little bit more about electric vehicles.
Thanks, John. So this is a relatively new topic for us, and I am assuming it's for most of our audiences. Electric vehicles, if you go back 5 years ago, you probably didn't know too many people with electric vehicles or weren't hearing too much about them, but they're definitely starting to take off. And so what I'll be talking about is a bit of a mix of some general background information about electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging, as well as a description of some of the things that we're doing to prepare for the influx of electric vehicles that we're expecting in Calgary. So as I mentioned, we are in the really early stages of EV adoption. And if you look at this graph, it almost looks like we're at zero, but we're not. We're at about 2,000 vehicles right now, just a little over 2,000 vehicles in Calgary. But compared to the total number of vehicles, that's obviously still very low. However, what we're expecting to see is really an exponential growth in adoption of electric vehicles. So that's where we might be at really low numbers today, but we think we could see up to 200,000 vehicles on the roads by 2035. And so that's why we're starting to look at electric vehicles and trying to prepare for this change, because it's going to happen very quickly once it gets going. General information, when you look at Alberta, more than 50% of the EVs in Alberta are in the Calgary area. It's about 55%. Part of that is you just see much higher adoption in urban centers. So Calgary and Edmonton have the majority of the electric vehicles in the province. And then we slightly beat out Edmonton, potentially for economic reasons, or because we're slightly better connected to some of the electric vehicle charging networks in BC, down here in southern Alberta. So as we see adoption grow, we'll expect to see Calgary continue to be at the forefront of that. And currently, as I said, less than 1% of our vehicles are electric. So I'll talk here about some of the different types of charging that are available for electric vehicles. If you're not as familiar as them, this can be useful to know, because there's a tendency of people like me who live and breathe this stuff to talk about it as if everyone knows what I'm talking about, even though that's not necessarily true. So electric vehicles, like anything that uses a battery, you need to charge the battery in order to use them. And there's three main types of ways or levels that you can use to charge your vehicle. The first one, which is usually referred to as level 1, This is what happens if you just take an extension cord and you plug your vehicle into a typical outlet in your house. So whatever outlet you might have in your garage, a normal electrical cord, it will charge your vehicle. It does work. There's plenty of people out there who use it, but it is pretty slow, especially with newer vehicles that have bigger chargers. So it can take 18 hours for a full charge if you fully drain the battery on your vehicle. And so you see this a lot. People who maybe don't drive a lot, people who didn't want to make any changes in the electrical system in their home, this is the type of charging that they might use, but it's not necessarily the most convenient because it does take quite a while to charge the vehicles. The next type of charging is level 2 charging. So this requires, for most vehicles, a separate dedicated charger. And you can still plug this in at your home, but it would use the same plug as what you see for dryers or your stove. So a 240 volt plug instead of a 120 volt plug. It cuts the charging time really significantly. You can get a full charge in 4 to 8 hours of time. And so this is what we expect to be really common for people who drive EVs, because this way you can come home, plug in at night, and forget about your car. But if you have a late night, or you have a really early morning, or you run around a lot during the day and you need to get a quick boost in the middle of the day, this type of charger can get you charged a lot faster than a level 1. DC fast charging is also sometimes referred to as level 3 charging, but mostly it's referred to as DC fast charging, and it's the third type of charging. This is the fast charging, as the name says. So right now in Alberta, most of the chargers can charge your vehicles in about 30 minutes. There are already other chargers that can charge vehicles quite a bit faster than that. So you're seeing times of 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And this charger is intended as a replacement for gas stations. So it needs to be really fast because it's for people who are driving through and not wanting to stop. You wouldn't see these at your home. You wouldn't necessarily see them at a mall because people don't mind spending time at a mall, but at a gas station in the middle of a highway where people just want to plug their car in, get charged and keep going, that's where you'll see the DC fast charging. And they are pretty key to electric vehicle adoption because this is what allows people to drive longer distances. If you're driving to Edmonton, if you're driving to BC, you'll likely need to stop and use a DC fast charger at some point to charge your car. And so knowing you have access to a charger that can top you up on the go and do it relatively quickly is a really important factor for people who are considering an electric vehicle. Some other considerations looking at electric vehicle charging, and the reason we focus on this is from our perspective, this is what uses the power. This is our connection to the vehicles is through the charger. And then this is also what requires infrastructure in buildings or in homes. And so this requires some forethought. And what we're expecting is the demand for EV charging will grow at the same pace or even faster than electric vehicle adoption. If you think about it, you're not going to want to buy a car if you don't know that you can charge it. So you'll want to have a plan either for charging at your home or charging somewhere else before you get an electric vehicle. That's also why access to home charging is really important. What we see with electric vehicles is more than 80% of the charging is done at home. That's really the convenience factor. You don't have to go to a gas station in most cases. You can go home, plug your car in and forget about it overnight, and it'll be good to go in the morning. But if you can't plug it in at home, then you're looking for other places that you can charge your vehicle, looking for fast chargers or maybe chargers at a local shopping mall or something. And so that will change people's views on how easy it might be to get an electric vehicle. The other piece is, oh yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question from Kyle. He would like to know how many amps does the fast charging unit draw? Like, what are we talking here?
I have it in my head in kilowatts. So the ones that charge in 30 minutes would be about, they're 50 kilowatts, and then they'll go up from there up to 350, 450. So there's some very, very large, very fast chargers out there. I could pull out, I'll ask maybe Jafal or John, pull out a calculator and they use 480 volts as an input, and you can do the conversion while I talk, so I don't have to stop and pull my calculator out. I forget off the top of my head what that would be in amps, but it's quite large. Like these are not, you wouldn't put one in your home because it would draw like way more power than your home. But these are what you'd see at large sites, and they have pretty significant power demands, versus a level 2 charger would be in the realm of 7 to 10 kilowatts. So less than a fifth of what the fast charger would draw, and more reasonable to have at home.
Yeah, so most of us, work in fair-sized buildings with parkades and stuff like that. So this would be something that you would put in a parkade, or would it be a level 2 one?
It really depends on the use case you're looking at. I'm trying to go back. So what I'm expecting to see is a mix of both of these, to be honest, because level 2, it's 48 hours for a full charge, but most people aren't using the full battery capacity of their vehicle. If you're driving around the city, if you're driving around Calgary, you're only using a fraction of it. So you only need to charge for a little bit. And stopping at a mall for an hour or an hour and a half on a level 2 charger could be enough to fully charge someone's vehicles. And those are also places people don't mind stopping and spending some time. Same with restaurants or hotels. The fast chargers, definitely where you'd see them is, the Petrocans, Shells, companies like that are looking at fast chargers to add to their gas stations as part of their business models. You might also see them in other locations, often mixed with level 2. So because they're so much more expensive and they take so much more power, what you might have in a parkade or at a parking lot is one fast charger and 2 or 3 level 2 chargers. So the people who really need it can get a fast charge, and the people who have a bit more time or planning to spend time there can plug into a level 2.
And Nicole, if I can quickly add to the question, I think that was raised, a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger, if it's getting 3-phase power, that's about 60 amps at 480 volts.
Okay. And then
just sort of one last question on this topic is, before we move on with your thing here. So Karim is asking, well, I can't read his text, but anyway, he's looking for like, what would a general cost be for, for the fast charge? Like, you go to the Petrocan or whatever. And so do you have any idea or experience from?
I have a rough idea, and I'm just going to couch this and say your best bet is to go to several suppliers and get a quote. So yeah. I'm not getting quotes for them on a daily basis. And fast charging, especially, the tricky part is it depends. If you go for 50 kilowatt, it's much cheaper than if you go for like the really, really fast or much fancier ones. So those range between $40,000 for a charger and up. And I'll just leave it at and up, because it gets really dependent on the specifics of what you're looking for. But the sort of standard 50 kilowatt charger starts at about $40,000. But then level 2 chargers are much less expensive. They can be between $6,000 and $12,000 per charger, depending on the number of vehicles you could charge at once and the details of the charger.
Okay. We'll carry on.
Yeah. So I think where I was talking about last was retrofitting existing sites, and the reason I'm bringing this up is as we've just been talking about, these chargers need power, and they're not things that would have normally been thought of for buildings that were built, let's say 10 years ago, or in Calgary, looking at some of the houses 40 years ago. So if you're planning a new site and you're thinking about electric vehicle charging, it's really important to plan ahead. And that can look from anything from just installing empty conduit that you can put wires in later to supply EV charging, all the way to potentially installing wires ahead of time. But the key is you don't want to be going into your parkade and ripping up the concrete 5 years down the road because you need to put in wire for electric vehicle charging. So if you're thinking about it, if you know about it, think about options about at least getting the power to wherever the chargers would be, because that's something that gets much more expensive after the fact. There are energy management solutions out there, both for homes and for business sites, that can look at how to manage the draw of these chargers to help fit within the existing capacity of your site. So if you have a site that has some spare capacity, there's solutions out there that will help you power manage between different chargers to fit in as much as you can onto a site instead of doing an upgrade to the site. But that really depends site by site and what you're looking at for charging. You know, if you're looking at DC fast charging, it's a lot more likely that site upgrades might be needed to provide the power than if you're looking at level 2 charging. And then tying back to the first 2 points, something we're expecting to see is that as electric vehicle adoption increases, more people will be specifically looking for electric vehicle charging, or at least the ability to charge their vehicles when they choose where they live. So it's not necessarily a big driver right now, but when most people have vehicles, or even more people have vehicles, when they're looking for homes or apartments, they're going to be wanting to know that they can charge their vehicle at home, because so much of the charging is done at home. This is another opportunity I wanted to highlight for people on the call, because as I mentioned, there is a cost to the chargers, and retrofits on existing sites, depending on the specifics, they're not always cheap to do. So Natural Resources Canada has 2 programs that are offering funding to support the installation of EV chargers in Canada. They're very long acronyms, terrible acronyms: the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or ZEVIP, and then the Electric Vehicle and Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Development Initiative. Both of them are supporting charger installations, but the ZEVIP program is focused within communities or within cities. So it would be looking at on street, at workplaces, at businesses, for fleets who are looking to electrify, and examples like that. Whereas the other one, the Electric Vehicle Development Initiative, is looking at transportation corridors. So at the outskirts of the city, along major highways, when you're trying to get from one place to further away, that's their area of focus. Both programs offer funding for up to 50% of the cost of the EV charger installations. So it is a pretty significant help. The challenge that I've seen from talking to other customers who have asked about this program is they do have a minimum size requirement. So they require applicants to install at least 20 chargers, at least in all of the cases that have come through now. There's always the chance that in the future they could adjust those requirements, but for now they're only accepting relatively large applications because they don't have the manpower to sort through, 20 times the number for single or double charger installations. And so if you own multiple sites and are thinking of installing a small number of chargers at each site, you could put in one application for all of the sites. So let's say 4 chargers per site at 5 sites, you can put in one application and meet that minimum number. But if you're only installing 1 or 2 chargers, unfortunately right now, this isn't a great opportunity. The last slide is just talking about one of the programs we've launched to try and prepare for the uptake of adoption. So I've been talking a lot about the amount of power that these chargers draw, and that's something that we know we have to prepare for as well. We have standard assumptions about how much power homes might draw, how much power businesses might draw, but that all can change if we start seeing more electric vehicles and electric vehicle chargers. So we launched a pilot which is helping us get information about how people use vehicles. It's called the Charge Up Pilot, and it's helping install 60 EV chargers across Calgary. And it allows us to get data on when people are charging, how much power the chargers are drawing, and where they're being used. The other thing it does is, in exchange for this data, we're offering funding for the participants in the program to help them pay for the chargers. So it was filling a little bit of the gap between NRCan's program and maybe the small guys who didn't want to install a lot of chargers. It is a small program, so 60 chargers, including chargers at residential site, and we are currently fully subscribed, but we always ask that anyone who has an interest in EV charging, feel free to send us a note. Our contact information was at the beginning of the presentation. It's gridinnovation@nmax.com. If additional spots become open in the program, or even if we don't have spots in the program, we might be able to help you work through the process of determining the power requirements for your site. So we're always happy to talk to people about their plans. Really, for any new technology, Javal will talk more about this, but in this case, specifically electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging.
One last question here. So which charger would you recommend for the towers downtown? And the other part of that question is the home charger. I'm assuming like the 240 volt version. That's not covered by any programs, I'm assuming, or maybe I'm wrong, but
No, it isn't. No, it is usually lower cost. It'll be in the realm of under. There's chargers for under $1,000 up to, you know, $2,500 is. Although once again, if you're right at the capacity limits for your house, or you want to bring in a new power supply to your garage, there's always people who are outliers, but that's the typical cost of those chargers. For the towers downtown, it's tricky to answer without knowing more specifics. If you're thinking for a workplace where people are staying there and parking throughout the day, that's where level 2 is a pretty cost-effective option. It's not as expensive to install. You know, people will be there for longer. But it depends a bit on your site and what you're looking for in terms of why you're offering the charging. If you have a fast charger, you can offer potentially more people charges throughout the day, because people will likely drive up to the level 2 and plug in and stay there for at least half the day, if not the whole day. So it's difficult to make a generic recommendation, but I guess all I'd say is think about who your intended audience is. Are they going to stay there for a long time? And if they are, then you could potentially save some money and use a level 2 charger. If you think they're going to want to be in and out relatively quickly, or looking for like a bit of a solution that maybe feels a little bit more forward thinking or a little bit fancier, that's the level 2 to say, well, okay, the DC fast charging. If you know, there's people who would think, okay, I'm going to go to this place just specifically because they offer the fast charging, because that's what I need or what I'm looking for right now.
Yeah, I know of a few condos that have put that in, but again, it's a kind of a logistical problem as well. So even if for residential high rises, which we have all over the city, it's a real challenge in a parkade, and so I guess we'll probably see infrastructure-wise for the building. It's certainly a challenge. I understand what you're saying. The installation costs of just getting the power where you need it's going to be huge. But so the actual cost of the chargers, nothing compared to that. Yeah. So you definitely will have to be looking at some long-term things, but also logistics of it. Whereas everybody has an assigned parking stall, so how are they going to work all that? So it's an interesting thing to see. I'd be interested to see what they did out in BC or something. They're a little bit further along than we are, I assume.
Yeah, they definitely are see a lot higher adoption in BC and Quebec, for example. The NRCan funding, the ZEVIP funding, it does include funding for multi-unit residential buildings like condos, specifically because NRCan recognizes that as a real challenge. And so that is an option there, is their funding includes those types of buildings. And that's where as well the energy management systems can really come in handy, because they can help make sure that you're not having to do like the really expensive upgrades to the building, but trying to fit the charging into the capacity that's already there.
Yeah, and then I guess the last comment, I guess we'll have to move on, but it definitely, when it gets up to scale, where it's being heavily utilized, that'll definitely, you mentioned, it'll definitely shift the demand cycle
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
for the city. Absolutely. So all of a sudden you'll have this high demand at 8 p.m. When everybody plugs in their vehicle. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
that's not true.
actually, most people plug their vehicle. What we're seeing through our pilot and what we expected based on some studies is people are mostly plugging in between 4:30 and 6 or 5 and 6.
Oh.
So right when you come home from work, first thing you do is plug in your vehicle. So that's actually right on top of our existing residential system peak, which presents its own challenges and is why we're looking at this now so that we can come up with solutions ahead of time before that becomes a capacity constraint on our system. But it definitely will change load usage patterns for sure. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Javal to talk about solar, CHP, and energy storage.
Thanks, Nicole. And hi, everyone. Thanks again for having us today. Great talking to you. So I'll be telling you about a group of technologies typically you'll be hearing in industry called distributed energy resources. They include solar PV as well as energy storage, CHP, for example, as well. And I'll give you some examples of what we're working on to serve you better in this space. So solar PV, combined heat and power, or CHP systems, and energy storage, like I said, they're all, you can all think of them as part of this distributed energy resource group. And they're a set of technologies that we're really seeing customers installing in greater and greater numbers. And increasing DR installations can have impacts on the greater electrical grid as well. So we work with customers to understand and mitigate those impacts. So as I go through the presentation, I'll be talking to you about the trends and forecasts we're seeing in solar PV adoption. I'll also talk about the use cases we're seeing for energy storage, and I'll highlight some of the work we're doing to further enable you to install these technologies. So here you can see what things look like from the solar PV perspective. So over the last number of years, we've really seen growing interest in solar PV or solar generation. So annual installations doubled in both 2018 and then again in 2019. As the cost of solar generation has decreased, it's becoming an increasingly popular choice for businesses and homeowners. One thing you can see here as you're looking at the graph in front of you, at the chart, is as we look ahead as well, we're definitely expecting this growth to continue to increase with a 3 to 8-fold increase by 2025 and potentially up to 20-fold increase by 2030 in Calgary alone. It's also interesting to point out something that this trend isn't showing, but something we are definitely seeing already is that as prices are coming down, it's actually more commercial sized installations that are starting to come up. So we're seeing more and more interest from commercial sector and from commercialized or commercial sized installations. Next slide, please. Another type of DER, energy storage, can come in a number of different forms. Today, I'm really going to focus on battery energy storage, because that is quickly becoming the dominant kind of energy storage, as it uses similar technology to what you have in cell phones as well as in electric vehicles. And you've probably heard about this kind of technology. You may have heard about the Tesla Powerwall, for example. That's an in-home example of installation of battery energy storage. And energy storage's main appeal is that it provides flexibility to store energy when you don't need it, and then use it when it makes the most sense. The use cases do differ between residential and commercial customers. Forward-thinking residential customers that may have also solar on their roofs, may store that solar energy when they're not at home, and then use the battery to put that energy to use when they get home. Whereas what we're seeing commercial customers think about is typically opportunities for where they can peak shave or reduce their demand charges. In Alberta, so far, energy storage installations are still relatively rare, but as prices continue to decrease, just like we saw with solar PV, we are anticipating to see more installations of this technology too. Next slide, please. So now that you've got a bit about the background of what we're seeing, I'm going to highlight two technologies we've been working on to improve our service to you as you look to install these kinds of technologies. First one I'm going to talk about is our hosting capacity map, which helps customers understand our grid's capacity for new DER projects. As we've worked to support customers, such as your organizations, to connect DER projects, we've heard that you've been looking for a more efficient way to understand our system as you plan your projects. Next slide. This is how we saw an opportunity to make this initial experience for you quick and simple, by providing you with an all-in-one tool to help streamline your project planning for DER. Working with our internal teams, we developed an interactive online tool, which actually includes two maps. I'm going to focus on the hosting capacity map, one of the maps, but there's also a second load capacity map to help you plan new buildings or developments. These maps, and using them, in minutes you'll be able to understand how your potential projects can fit onto our grid. Next slide. So here you can see what the tool looks like once you've logged on through our website. So this map shows the estimated hosting capacity available across our service territory for commercial-sized DER projects. It uses a color spectrum to visualize the available capacity across our grid. You can see on the right side there, kind of in the center, it looks like a Google map, but it's got a whole bunch of colors on it. And what those colors are showing you are the different amounts of capacity available to fit your different DER projects, which are specific to the location or where in the city you are. So if you look at the bottom left side, you'll see a legend that we've included that helps show you what the different colors mean. Most simply, we have red, which shows the areas that have the highest likelihood for needing system upgrades if you were to install there. And then we also have green, areas that have the most capacity and the lowest likelihood for system upgrades. So customers can also use this map very similar to a Google map and zoom in to find capacity for specific addresses that they may be looking for and looking into to develop a project. And once you've narrowed down a site and you're ready to proceed with a project, you can contact us through the information provided there on the top left side of the page. So that's a quick overview of this map. There's definitely more information. These maps are very much live already online. You can find out more by clicking or looking up www.nmax.com/system resources, as you see on the side of the screen there. I'd like to now tell you about a second project that's also underway. Over the last few years as well, we've heard from customers that were looking, and I like how you talked about it earlier, Mark, about the big buildings downtown. That's an example of one of our dense urban or secondary network grid areas. And we've heard from customers there that they're looking to generate electricity into those grids and just do that the same way that they can elsewhere within our city. These areas are highly reliable, provide very reliable power service, but one limitation they've had so far is that they don't allow customers to export their generated power into the grid. So that's where we heard this request, and we've partnered with the federal and provincial governments to develop an industry-leading pilot project to enable our customers to generate power back into our dense urban areas. We're super excited about this. The project's very much in flight. We are looking forward to and technically progressing on removing this barrier, and we'll be sharing more information as the project progresses. Next slide. So the projects and work we've talked about today are a few examples of how we are listening to your feedback and developing technologies to serve you, our customers, better. So don't hesitate to reach out, just like Nicole said. Let us know if you're planning a new kind of project in Calgary. We look forward to working together with you and your teams as we continue to innovate for our joint future together. So thank you, and that's it for our formal presentation. We'll open up the floor to more questions.
Sure. Well, I have a couple, I guess, because I guess I'm not that much of an old timer, but remember way back when, I would say even in the, well, it'd be in the 70s and 80s for sure. In bigger buildings, we always talked a lot about power factor correction and what a big deal that was. And then suddenly it wasn't a big deal anymore. And now that probably, I'm assuming that smart metering will eventually make its way into to our infrastructure, then it'll be a big deal again, won't it?
So I think something I'd add, and one really interesting thing about where DR technology is going is just the amount of smarts that's being packed into this equipment. These inverters, for example, which are what are doing the actual converting of power from the DC energy that's collected by the solar arrays, for example, and converting it into what's in your plug. Those devices have gotten a lot smarter over the years, and they're to a point where they can auto sense what's happening on voltage. They can look at power quality. They can be adjusting accordingly for it. So as we continue to see more and more of these kinds of technologies deployed, I think you highlight a good point. One, increased visibility through things like smart meters or AMI meters will be helpful, but also I'd say and underscore that the technologies themselves have come a far way in helping with these problems and being able to respond automatically to help balance these kinds of issues.
Well, again, another comment that's sort of about that. It's like over the last, particularly in the last 10 years, the power balance within bigger buildings has certainly changed now with changes to our lighting mostly, and to different. We use a lot of VFDs on the motors and stuff now, so the profile has changed quite a bit from what it was 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, and so now, from what I've seen, you can end up in some real imbalance issues within a building, and then I can't imagine what that does to the utility. So is there any kind of a an education program or some kind of a thing between the utility and the users about setting up to use your power wisely? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so I think there's a few points there, and really good point, right? I mean, there's been a lot of change already in what's happening in buildings. I love the examples you brought up, including VFDs. There's already been a lot of change, and so we definitely recognize that complexity. And when a customer comes to us to want to interconnect a project, we work closely with them, especially if you're thinking about something in the downtown or really any part of our system, and you're looking at a larger interconnection. We've created a bunch of material. Also, we have a technical interconnection requirements document for the consultants or designers that you're hiring on your teams to help you with these kinds of installations, to help guide them through what's needed from our side to make sure that the grid's in good shape and so that you can safely and reliably interconnect with us. But we also, have a whole process once a customer applies to us and wants to interconnect, to go through with them all the different checks and commissioning points and make sure that we're setting them up for success and ourselves up for success. And especially with all the new technologies we see coming down the pipe, this is where, we're saying we'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. We'd love to talk to you early. If you're thinking about trying a new technology out, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk about it and make sure we're working with you to make sure it's successful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, absolutely. It is much more of a partnership now than it ever used to be before. Because yes, it's complex. The needs are different, and so now I'm certainly, I can imagine it's a challenge for the utility to react to all of that. So where do you, with your crystal ball, where do you see us going out onto the horizon, like 10 years, 20 years? What do we, what is it going to look like? Do you want to give me a little snapshot of your personal opinion? Everybody's got an imagination, but
definitely, I think, and you know, if you look at what's happening around us and where things are going, and you look at our phones, for example, that do so much more than phone calls now. I think everything is going to become more interconnected, more flexible, including electricity, how we use it, how we can change it on demand, and have it suit our needs and hopefully save us money also in return. But I think everything's going to be more integrated and more automated and more intuitive, I think, as time goes on, from all perspectives, including electricity.
Mark, can I just inject here a little bit?
absolutely.
Oftentimes we get a little bit worried. Back 15 years ago, we didn't have as much power capacity as we do today. And so my question is, are we still fat with power? Are we going to go back to the days where we may run out on those wintry days, where we may have to look at load shedding and the buildings going down in the off hours? Are we still fat?
I don't know if we're fat. That might be more of a question for the Alberta Electric System Operator, but I think, you know, in my humble opinion, I think we're pretty right-sized. I think the amount of generation we have, and this is the constant preoccupation of the ISO, is making sure we have enough generation in all circumstances to ensure we avoid something like what happened in Texas. And I think, you know, our weatherproofing already up here, and the winter we just experienced is a good example that we're probably just fine on the weather side. And then in the summers, you know, this is carefully monitored, and especially as we see more of this two-way flow happening. And as Nicole was saying, you know, we're seeing more load pickup. We're very carefully paying attention to the changes that are happening in consumption on our system. And we're also modeling and stress testing our system in the future to make sure that we don't run into these kinds of issues and we can be way ahead of them. But other points from John, Nicole, on that?
Yeah, I'll just jump into, because electric vehicles are one that we get a lot of questions about. Is the grid going to break? Is there a point where we won't have enough power? And the answer to both is, like, the grid isn't going to break. In part, you know, one reason is we're not going from 0 to 100 in one day. Even though we're expecting really fast growth, there's still going to be a period of time over which that happens. And really where we're expecting to see the impacts of this is at the local level. So this is customers changing what they want to do with power and what they want from their buildings, whether it's needing more power for electric vehicle chargers or wanting to install more generation and export power onto the grid. And so that's where a lot of our focus is right now, is trying to make sure that we're flexible enough to let our customers make their own choices around electricity and energy and what they want to do with it. And so planning ahead to see how electric vehicle chargers changes load patterns so that we can be a step ahead and have a plan in place for when we see more of that. And so ideally, it's really a seamless process for customers or people using power, where they get a charger and they just connect to the grid. But that's part of where, for now, we're really trying to work as closely or as hand in hand with our different customers as we can to help them through the process of connecting different types of technology.
And thanks, Nicole. I got another question here for Javal. And we have a lot of members, well, not a lot, we have a few members. We're talking about combined heat and power, and their job is to sell micro turbines, which are really fast coming onto line into some of the buildings to share some of that load and the exportation. And I was just recently down to a Hutterites colony where they were actually doing a lot that themselves, little natural gas and turbines, making their own power for their facilities, and finally getting the wherewithal to actually export their power. That's still not here in Calgary. So the people that are producing these micro turbines, producing power in the city, they're kind of held right to the facility themselves. Not that they have such a large capacity they could power their whole building and have some left over, but it's as they get close to it, they have tripping mechanisms that won't allow that feedback. When do you expect that, or is there somebody that they could talk to about actually exporting some of the power, if that's even available to them today?
Les, it's a great question. In that project that I talked about there at the end, the secondary network export project, as we call it, the one where we're partnering with the federal and provincial government, is exactly aimed at solving this issue. Because we've definitely heard from customers, and we know that CHPs are a good technical fit, for example, in the downtown core. So while the first pilot we're looking at deploying there is squarely on solar PV and enabling it, we're designing that technical solution so that it could work for any DER, including CHPs. So it's very much in flight. We will have more information coming down the pipe, but that project's going to be wrapping up in 2023. So as it does, we'll definitely be looking to take those learnings and be able to then provide a technical solution to help solve that exact problem.
Yeah, excellent. Because right now they're doing it at TCPL. They're also doing it at the Millennium Tower, and they're using natural gas generators to produce power, and they can actually make money even up to the gas prices upwards of around $9 a cubic meter. Wow. Which is, so they're a long ways from that. So they want to run those things as much as they can, and even have a payback to be able to export it if they could.
Yeah, it's a great point, and we definitely have been hearing that, or we had a good sense. I'm happy you're helping speak to that point, because we had a good feeling that there's a lot of interest on that side, and that's exactly why we've made sure that the technical solution we're developing will also be able to enable that. So happy to hear it, and it's very much in flight. We are working through it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
So then load balance, and I hate to bring up the word climate change, but what I'm getting at is as we in Calgary, we've always had odd weather events. I mean, we're used to it, right? But load wise, I think last year we had a really high peak. I think it was last year.
Yeah,
it was something crazy in the summertime, and so I guess what my question is how do you plan for your infrastructure 10 years from now? How do you predict? Is it you do some modeling or something like that, or who's the guy who does all that?
So it's not a guy, it's a whole team, and a few of them, but they actively pay very, very close attention. And Nicole and I used to work directly for that team. Very close attention to what all the loads are doing in the city, how they're changing, how customer behavior is changing, and modeling that forward, understanding how it's growing, what the growth rates are. And then we are also, as we learn, through the pilot projects that Cole's talking about, through the ones I was talking about, is we learn how different technologies are going to be impacting what's happening in the future. They're building that into their forecasts so that they can be as accurate as possible. Not to mention, they do very rigorous back checking afterwards to see how good their guesses got.
And I'd also add the slides that we actually shared that had predictions for the rate of electric vehicle adoption and solar adoption. In those cases, we worked with an external consultant who does this for municipalities, the government, other utilities. They're really experts in this because this was a new area of focus for us. So to get started and make sure that we were trying to get it right and get the best information we could, we worked with a consultant to develop the adoption forecast for electric vehicles and for rooftop solar.
So I guess we got maybe time for one more question. Anyway, Kyle's asking, or maybe a couple. Kyle's asking, are you using data analytics to predict the energy usage in the future? So I guess you referring to what we were just talking about. So it must be in your modeling, you must be using, I think you kind of answered that, but you can make a comment on that if you want.
Data analytics is a really powerful tool in general. And I'd say, the modeling we're doing, data analytics is another added layer that you can put on that to do different studies, do different stress tests, look at different sides of things. But for lots of things that go on, and analysis, and understanding of the grid, the the great thing about data analytics is it allows you to look through a lot of information and get useful insights out of it in a way that a human totally can't. So we definitely, as a company, are looking at data analytics and seeing how we can use it to help with this. Nicole?
No, I was just going to say, data. There's a whole bunch of tools that our planning teams and our forecasting teams use. Definitely data analytics. I think there'll just be more and more of that. There's more and more data from everything. All the solar panels now, the inverters can provide more data. You can get data from electric vehicles, so we'll be seeing more data analytics. But also not just data analytics, real world pilot projects, regression models, statistical analysis. There's a whole bunch of different pieces, and we try and use as much as we can to get the best picture.
And maybe I'll throw one last one in here. So you had briefly mentioned energy storage, and of course, with wind power and photovoltaics, storage is a huge thing, and it's what's held it back. So so where do you see that in 10 years? Like, you know what I'm getting at is you guys have been, you started, I don't know how many years ago you started working on the solar thing, and now you're maybe just starting to get your feet wet on it. So what does that look like 10 years from now?
Energy storage is okay, what's great about energy storage is the fact that it can, well, store energy, yes, but really that means it can act as either a load or it can act as a generator, really when you want it to, as long as it has the space to do it. And that's a big game changer. It's a really unique tool in the power industry, and something that, you know, being able to store energy for a longer period of time on a utility scale or even to affect the grid is definitely going to be a really useful tool. Right now, I think the price point is still a little high, which is why we're not seeing a lot of adoption yet, but it's definitely something that the whole industry is looking at because it has a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity to potentially produce cost savings for the grid, cost savings for customers, help deal with local issues, help deal with larger issues. So it's in 10 years, I think we will see a lot more energy storage deployed across our system.
Okay, so we could probably look forward to something locally then along those lines and fairly soon.
We'll see.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, do you have any other questions, Les? Or
Well, I'm just happy.
comments?
Like, I like riding motorcycles. I see there's lots of electric motorcycles. I hope you're going to account for those. And my lazy butt would like to be able to fast charge my electric bicycle as well. So
Yes.
those in the future as well.
That is fantastic. Yes.
Don't forget your scooter. You need a scooter too, Les.
Don't forget my scooter. That's right. Well, thank you
Well-
guys for that. Nicole, you're a real hit there. Thank you very much. You got a lot of compliments there.
Electric vehicles are the new and exciting thing. So it's not me, it's the topic.
It's nice to be part of the lead, right? Part of the
Mhm.
team. Good.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in that 5 to 10 year window. It's definitely going to be different than
Mhm.
life as we see it right now. That's for sure. And I guess, well, we didn't even get into some of the local Calgary transmission, the local transmission grid stuff that I always have comments on, but I guess we'll have to save that for another time. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this little chat we had, and I'm sure that we'll continue to get a few comments as a few people watch it. They couldn't make this meeting, but were watching it through our website,
Mhm.
and I definitely appreciate your. It was a good, well balanced, and it was a good presentation. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. This was
Our-
fun.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess we'll see you in the movies.
There we go. Yeah.
We'll see each other in the future.
Good job. Good job.
Very much,
All
guys.
right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Bye.
Bye.